I was having a perfectly normal Tuesday until I tried to turn into my own driveway and found it blocked by what looked like half a mountain of gravel. My heart sank as I sat there in my Honda Civic, staring at the massive pile of gray rocks that someone had dumped right across the entrance to my private road like some kind of medieval barricade. This wasn't just any road, it was my family's private driveway that led to our house, which sat on 5 acres at the end of a quarter-mile stretch of perfectly maintained asphalt that my grandfather had paid $35,000 to build back in 1987. The road was clearly marked with bright yellow private property no trespassing signs every 50 feet, and it had never, ever been part of the Willowbrook Heights HOA's jurisdiction. I turned off my engine and got out of my car, walking around the gravel pile that had to be at least 4 feet high and 20 feet wide. My work shoes crunched on the loose stones as I tried to figure out what the hell was going on. The pile was fresh. I could tell because there were still tire tracks from whatever truck had dumped it here, probably sometime during the 8 hours I'd been at work. That's when I saw her, Karen Stevens, the self-appointed queen of Willowbrook Heights HOA, standing in her perfectly manicured front yard with her arms crossed and wearing the biggest, most satisfied smile I'd seen since my ex-wife got half my retirement account in the divorce. Karen was in her mid-50s with the kind of blonde hair that came from a bottle and cost more than most people's car payments. She was wearing one of her typical, I'm important outfits, a crisp white blouse, navy blue blazer, and pearls that she probably thought made her look like some kind of suburban diplomat. The woman spent more money on her appearance than most people spent on groceries, and she had the attitude to match. "Having a little problem getting home, Dave?" she called out, her voice dripping with fake sweetness that made my teeth hurt. I walked across the street to where she was standing, trying to keep my temper under control. "Karen, what is this?" I asked, pointing at the mountain of gravel that was blocking my access to my own home. She walked toward me with that smug expression she wore whenever she thought she was winning some imaginary battle against the forces of neighborhood chaos. Everything about her body language screamed superiority, the way she held her shoulders back, the slight tilt of her chin, the condescending smile that never quite reached her eyes. "That's a safety barrier to prevent unauthorized vehicle access to community property," she announced, like she was reading from some official manual instead of making up nonsense on the spot. "Community property?" I laughed, but it wasn't a happy laugh. It was the kind of bitter laugh you make when someone says something so ridiculous that you can't believe they're serious. "Karen, this is my private road. It's been in my family for 35 years. Actually," she said, pulling out a thick manila folder that looked like it had been prepared by a team of lawyers working overtime, according to the original neighborhood plat maps from 1985, that road was supposed to be designated for community access. The HOA board held an emergency meeting last week and voted unanimously to reclaim it for proper community use. I felt my blood pressure shooting up like a rocket on the 4th of July. The woman was standing there, bold as brass, telling me that my own driveway belonged to the community. "You can't just decide that my private property belongs to the HOA. We absolutely can when it comes to roads that were improperly privatized without proper legal documentation," she replied, waving her folder around like it was some kind of magic wand that could change property ownership with a simple flourish. "This gravel barrier stays exactly where it is until you can provide ironclad proof of legal ownership of that roadway." The casual way she said it, like she was discussing the weather instead of blocking my access to my own home, made me want to throw something heavy in her general direction. But I forced myself to stay calm and keep my voice level, because I knew exactly what Karen Stevens didn't know about me. You see, Karen had made the critical mistake of picking a fight with the wrong person. While she spent her days playing neighborhood dictator and making people's lives miserable over ridiculous violations like mailbox colors, grass height, and the approved shade of white for house trim, I had a day job that she apparently knew absolutely nothing about. I was the transportation director for the entire county. Every road, every traffic light, every speed limit sign, every construction permit, every traffic study, every road closure, every transportation project, all of it went through my office. I controlled road access, traffic flow, and transportation infrastructure for over 200,000 people spread across 847 square miles. I had the authority to shut down highways, reroute traffic, approve or deny construction projects, and make decisions that affected thousands of commuters every single day. And Karen Stevens, in her infinite wisdom, had just declared war on someone who literally had the power to make her life very, very difficult. But I didn't tell her that. Not yet. I wanted to see how far she'd push this before I dropped the hammer. "So what exactly am I supposed to do?" I asked, pretending to be defeated and confused. "I can't get to my house with this pile of rocks in the way." You can park on the public street like everyone else and walk to your house until this property dispute gets sorted out through proper legal channels, she said with a dismissive shrug, like my inconvenience was completely irrelevant to her. Or you can save everyone a lot of time and trouble by admitting that road belongs to the community, and we can discuss reasonable shared access arrangements. I looked at the gravel pile, then at Karen's smug face, then back at the gravel pile. The woman had basically imprisoned me in my own home unless I wanted to hike a quarter-mile through the woods carrying groceries. You know what? I think I need to make some phone calls about this situation. Call whoever you want, Karen laughed, and it was the kind of laugh that villains make in movies right before the hero proves them wrong. The HOA board has voted, the decision is final, and we have full legal authority to protect community interests. As I walked back to my car, pulling out my phone to call my wife and explain why I'd be late for dinner and why she shouldn't wait up, I was already planning Karen Stevens' spectacular comeuppance. She had absolutely no idea that she'd just picked a fight with someone who could shut down every single road in her precious neighborhood with nothing more than a few phone calls and some official paperwork. That evening, I had to park 3 blocks away on Maple Street and walk to my house through the neighborhood, carrying my briefcase, laptop bag, and a bag of groceries from the store. The whole time, I could see Karen watching me from her living room window, probably enjoying every minute of my inconvenience and feeling very pleased with herself for putting me in my place. But while Karen was celebrating her victory and probably calling her HOA cronies to brag about how she'd handled the private road situation, I was in my home office with a cup of coffee and my laptop, researching every single transportation regulation, zoning law, and safety code that applied to her neighborhood. By midnight, I had compiled a comprehensive file of information that would make Karen Stevens regret she'd ever heard the words community property. More importantly, I had discovered several interesting facts about Willowbrook Heights that were going to make the next few weeks very educational for everyone involved. The next morning, I arrived at my office at the County Transportation Building an hour early and started making phone calls. My first call was to Sandra Martinez in the City Planning Department, requesting all the original plat maps, surveys, and development approvals for Willowbrook Heights dating back to 1985. My second call was to Tom Bradley at the County Surveyor's Office, asking for a complete verification of property lines and easements in Karen's neighborhood. My third call was to Jennifer Walsh in the Traffic Engineering Department, discussing some urgent safety concerns about road access and emergency vehicle clearance in residential developments. My fourth call was to Mike Chin in the Code Enforcement Division, requesting a comprehensive review of all transportation-related ordinances and their compliance status in suburban HOA communities. By 10 a.m., I had confirmed what I already knew from my grandfather's meticulously kept records. My road was 100% private property, built entirely on land that my grandfather had purchased outright and paid to develop himself. Karen's claim about community access was complete and utter nonsense based on outdated preliminary maps that had been superseded by newer surveys and final plat approvals decades ago. But more importantly, I discovered something absolutely fascinating about Karen's precious neighborhood. The entire Willowbrook Heights development had been built in the late 1980s without proper traffic impact studies, and several of the roads didn't meet current safety standards for emergency vehicle access, turning radius requirements, or sight distance regulations. As transportation director, I had not only the authority but the legal responsibility to address these safety violations whenever they came to my attention. And thanks to Karen's little stunt with the gravel pile, these issues had definitely come to my attention. My fifth phone call was to Karen Stevens herself. "Karen, this is Dave from down the street," I said when she answered, keeping my voice professionally neutral. "What do you want?" she snapped, clearly not in the mood for friendly conversation. "I wanted to let you know that I'll be having that gravel removed from my private road this afternoon by a county road crew." "Over my dead body," she practically shouted into the phone. "That gravel stays exactly where it is until you provide proper documentation proving legal ownership of that so-called private road." "Actually, Karen, I've already provided that documentation to the county surveyor's office, and they've confirmed that my road is entirely private property. But that's not the main reason I'm calling." "Then why are you bothering me with this?" "I'm calling as a professional courtesy to inform you that the County Transportation Department will be conducting a comprehensive safety review of your entire neighborhood starting tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. sharp." There was a pause that lasted long enough for me to take a sip of coffee. "What exactly does that mean?" "It means we'll be evaluating all roads, traffic patterns, intersection safety, emergency access routes, sight distances, and turning radii to ensure they meet current county transportation safety standards." Any roads or intersections that don't meet current standards will need to be brought into compliance immediately or potentially closed to vehicular traffic. Another pause, this one longer and more worried sounding. You can't just do that to an entire neighborhood. Actually, Karen, I can and I will. I'm the county transportation director, and ensuring public road safety is not just my job, it's my legal obligation. The silence on the other end of the phone was so complete that I thought she might have hung up or possibly fainted. When she finally spoke, her voice had lost all of its previous smugness and confidence. You're the transportation director? Have been for 8 years now. Funny how you never bothered to find out what your neighbors actually do for a living before you decided to block their private access roads with unauthorized gravel piles. This is harassment, she said, but her voice was shaking and she sounded like someone who was just realizing they'd made a terrible mistake. You can't use your official position to get personal revenge over a simple neighborhood dispute. Karen, I'm not using my position for personal revenge. I'm using my position to enforce transportation safety regulations that should have been properly addressed years ago when this neighborhood was first developed. The fact that these long overdue safety inspections happen to affect your particular neighborhood is just an unfortunate coincidence. But the costs? The costs of bringing roads up to current safety standards are the responsibility of the property owners who built or maintained roads that don't meet county requirements. That's been the law for 15 years. That afternoon, I had a county road crew remove every single piece of gravel from my private road. The crew chief, a guy named Roberto who'd worked for the county for 23 years, shook his head as his team loaded the rocks into dump trucks. Never seen anyone dump gravel on a private road before, he said, wiping sweat from his forehead. Takes some real nerve to block someone's driveway like that. What kind of person does something like that? The kind of person who doesn't understand property rights, I replied, watching Karen peer nervously out her living room window as the trucks hauled away her safety barrier. But the gravel removal was just the opening act. The real show started the next morning when 3 county inspection vehicles pulled into Karen's neighborhood and began what would become the most thorough transportation safety review in Willowbrook Heights' 35-year history. The inspection team consisted of 2 traffic engineers, a road safety specialist and a code enforcement officer, all armed with clipboards, measuring devices and decades of experience identifying transportation problems. They spent the first hour just driving around the neighborhood at exactly 25 miles per hour, noting issues and marking locations on their maps. The first major problem they identified was that Maple Street, the main road through Karen's section of the neighborhood, was actually 6 inches too narrow to meet current emergency vehicle access standards. Fire trucks and ambulances needed a minimum clearance that simply didn't exist. The second problem was that the intersection at Oak Avenue and Elm Drive created a dangerous blind spot that violated current traffic safety regulations. Cars turning left couldn't see oncoming traffic until they were already committed to the turn. The third problem was that several streets throughout the neighborhood lacked proper signage, road markings and reflective markers required by current county transportation codes. The fourth problem was inadequate storm drainage that caused water to pool on road surfaces during heavy rain, creating hydroplaning hazards. But the biggest problem of all was Karen's own street, Elm Drive, which had been built with a curve that was too sharp for the posted 25 miles per hour speed limit and lacked the required sight distance for safe vehicle operation according to current engineering standards. By noon, the inspection team had identified 63 separate violations of county transportation standards throughout Willowbrook Heights. Every single violation would need to be corrected within 90 days, or the affected roads would be temporarily closed to vehicular traffic until proper repairs were completed. The estimated cost for bringing the entire neighborhood into full compliance with current safety standards was $1,247,000. That afternoon my office phone rang. This is Karen Stevens, and I demand to speak to your supervisor immediately. Karen, I am the supervisor. I'm the transportation director. There is literally no one higher than me in the county transportation department except for the elected county commissioners. Then I want to talk to the county commissioners right now. Feel free to call them. The head commissioner is Robert Martinez, and his office number is public record. But I should probably warn you that Commissioner Martinez personally appointed me to this position specifically because of my expertise in transportation safety issues, and he tends to support my professional recommendations. This is clearly abuse of power and harassment. Karen, this is enforcement of safety regulations that have been on the books for 15 years. These standards exist to protect residents and ensure that emergency vehicles can safely access neighborhoods during fires, medical emergencies, and other critical situations. But the cost of all these so-called repairs. The cost of compliance is the legal responsibility of the property owners who built or maintained roads that don't meet county safety standards. My job is to identify violations and ensure they're corrected for public safety. There was a long pause before Karen spoke again, and when she did, her voice was much quieter and less confrontational. What exactly do you want from me? I want you to understand that blocking people's private roads is not only illegal, it's also incredibly stupid when you don't bother to find out who you're messing with. If I apologize for the gravel incident and promise never to block your road again, will you make these transportation violations disappear? I laughed, and this time it was a genuinely amused laugh. Karen, these safety violations exist whether I found them or not. The roads in your neighborhood genuinely don't meet current standards, and that's not something that changes based on apologies or promises. But surely there's some way to work this out. Actually, there is one option, I said, letting her hope for just a moment. What is it? I'll do anything. The county has a special program for bringing non-compliant neighborhoods into safety compliance through special assessment districts. Instead of each property owner paying individually for road improvements, the entire neighborhood can be assessed collectively and pay the costs over 10 years with low-interest financing. That sounds much more reasonable. However, I continued, the program requires unanimous written consent from all property owners in the affected area. And it requires a formal recommendation from the transportation director, that would be me certifying that the neighborhood association has demonstrated good faith cooperation with county transportation policies and regulations. Another long worried silence. Are you saying you won't recommend our neighborhood for the special assessment program? I'm saying that property owners who illegally block other people's private roads with unauthorized gravel piles don't demonstrate good faith cooperation with transportation policies. What if I resigned as HOA president immediately? That would certainly be a step in the right direction. But resignation isn't the same as making things right. What else would you need? I would need a formal written apology to me and my family for illegally blocking our private road and causing us significant inconvenience. I would need you to personally pay for all costs associated with removing that gravel pile. And I would need a written guarantee that nothing like this will ever happen again under any circumstances. And if I do all of that, you'll recommend us for the special assessment program? If you do all of that, and if the new HOA leadership demonstrates that they clearly understand the legal difference between community property and private property, then yes, I will seriously consider recommending the neighborhood for the special assessment program. The next morning, I found a handwritten letter in my mailbox along with a check. The letter was from Karen Stevens, and it was the most humble, apologetic piece of writing I'd ever seen from someone who'd spent the last 3 years terrorizing the entire neighborhood with petty power trips and ridiculous violations. The letter apologized profusely for blocking my road, acknowledged that she'd been completely wrong about the property ownership issue, admitted that she'd acted without proper research or legal authority, and promised that she would resign as HOA president immediately and permanently. She also included a personal check for $1,847 to cover the cost of gravel removal, my time dealing with the situation, and what she called a gesture of sincere regret for my inappropriate behavior. But the real satisfaction came 5 days later, when I received an official email from the new HOA president, a retired elementary school teacher named Mrs. Elena Rodriguez who'd lived in the neighborhood for 22 years and had always been known for her fairness and common sense. The email thanked me professionally for bringing important safety issues to the neighborhood's attention, and formally requested information about the Special Assessment District program for road improvements. Mrs. Rodriguez also attached a copy of the new HOA bylaws, which included specific language about respecting private property rights and requiring proper legal review before taking any action that might affect individual property owners. The neighborhood eventually got approved for the Special Assessment District after Mrs. Rodriguez organized meetings with all the residents and got unanimous consent for the program. The safety improvements were completed over the following 18 months, and property values actually increased by an average of $23,000 per home because the improved roads and enhanced safety features made the development much more attractive to potential buyers. Karen Stevens moved away 8 months later. I heard through Mrs. Rodriguez that she'd taken a job managing apartment complexes in another state and was supposedly looking for a fresh start, somewhere that people didn't know about her HOA reign of terror. The ironic thing is, if Karen had simply minded her own business and left my private road alone, I probably never would have looked into the transportation issues in her neighborhood. Those safety violations might have gone unnoticed for years, potentially creating real dangers for residents. But by picking a fight with the county transportation director, she ended up forcing her entire neighborhood to address problems that genuinely needed to be fixed. In a strange way, her attempt to hurt me ended up making the whole community significantly safer and more valuable. I still drive down my private road every morning and evening, past the exact spot where that massive pile of gravel used to sit like some kind of medieval siege barrier. Sometimes I think about Karen Stevens and wonder if she actually learned anything from the experience, or if she's somewhere else right now making some other neighborhood miserable. But mostly I just appreciate the fact that my road is clear, my property rights are fully respected, and nobody in Willowbrook Heights tries to mess with the transportation director anymore. The best part of the whole story? When Mrs. Rodriguez became the new HOA president, one of her very first official acts was to send a detailed letter to all residents reminding them to respect private property rights and follow proper legal procedures before taking any action that might affect their neighbor's property or access rights. The letter specifically mentioned that blocking private roads or driveways without clear legal authority is not only inappropriate and potentially illegal, but the HOA will not support, defend, or indemnify residents who engage in such actions under any circumstances. I framed that letter and hung it in my home office, right next to my transportation director certification and a photo of my grandfather standing proudly next to the road he built in 1987. Sometimes the sweetest revenge is simply letting people face the natural consequences of their own bad decisions. And sometimes those consequences end up teaching lessons that benefit everyone in the community, except for the person who was too arrogant and stubborn to learn them the easy way.